So organizing your work. Again, lists help. But within the list, you will have specific tasks. So you can do it different ways. You can organize by client or your patient. So when you go see your patient, you do everything you need for that patient all at once. That can be very good, unless you have 8 people. Because if you do everything for one, by the time you get to your 8th person, it could be 4 hours into your shift. You could organize by task. Get all your vital signs. Pass all of your meds. Make all phone calls. But what happens to the person who's sicker in your list? See, this is where prioritization is always going to be juggled. I personally like organizing by task because you tend to be able to go through the rooms, and you do your 5-minute assessment or less, and then you go back and you pass meds, and then you go back and do a focused assessment or a head to toe assessment, and then you make phone calls. But what you're doing is you're constantly visiting your people. We always want to do patient rounding once an hour, and if you organize by task, you will inherently visit your patients on a very regular basis. What happens when one of your patients needs more attention? Well, then you deviate from your plan. You have that plan B, take care of what needs to be done, and then get back to your first plan. You can also collaborate with other team members. Work with your team, your other nurses, your CNAs, and make sure that you delegate appropriately. Because if you delegate things off, that can free you up to do the more high-level work. Remember, as a nurse, as an RN, you are going to be working at the highest of levels in terms of nursing. That is not to take away from LPNs. LPNs are awesome. I mean, I've worked some LPNs that were incredible, but they're not RNs. They don't have the level of management and supervision responsibility that an RN has. So delegate as appropriate, which will free you up to do the hardest of work. There you go. How about organizing your environment? If you have a clipboard or a folder pad or a portfolio, set it up the same way every day. That way you know where all of your information is. Again, that report form that you've created for yourself, you know where every bit of data goes. So when you take a report, it's just merely filling in the blanks. And then when you need to look for it, you know right where to look for it. Bring the same materials to work. Put the same, when I was in the ER, I always had my IV start equipment in my right pocket of my scrubs. So I had IV start kit, I had IV catheters, I had some flushes. In my left pocket, I had spare tubings and other non-IV stuff. But I could walk into gloves. I could walk into a room and be ready to go like that because I knew right where things were. I could just reach into one pocket and pull out what I needed. But that took time to organize. So you need to find a pattern for you. Make sure you know where all the supplies are. And if possible, try to have every room set up the same way. Holy Family, they don't do a great job of that. They try, but they don't. When I was at Aurora Two Rivers, that was one thing we did when we went through a lean project where we tried to make things smoother and faster. We made sure every room had the same exact supplies, the same number of supplies, set in the same spot in the same drawers. It really speeds up the process when you can just essentially reach in and grab instead of hunting for what you're looking for. In the ER, seconds count. But in real life, seconds count too. So manage tasks. Do the most important, the most critical things first, rather than the simplest. Unless it's something that you can get done like that. Sometimes it's easier to get that little thing right out of the way, especially if it's a relatively minor patient request. So try to focus on your high priorities, but if you have the chance to get one little thing done early, do it. Don't procrastinate. Get things done now. The longer you put something off, the more likely it is something else is going to push it off more. Have you ever noticed at the end of your clinical shift, it's the last hour where things fall apart? That's when everything happens. So if you have stuff done before the last hour, now when things fall apart, you have nothing else to worry about but what's falling apart. Well, it happens in clinical. It happens in your job too. And if it's a big project, break it down into small tasks. And get help. And this is gonna go against some of you, I know. You are not perfect. You never will be perfect. So don't expect perfection. You can try for it. That's fine. Striving for perfection is a good goal, but don't expect it and don't beat yourself up when you aren't perfect, because that is a sure prescription for personal failure. Try to be as good as possible, but understand, as humans, none of us are perfect. I'm not, you're not. And the students, and I've had students that expect perfection out of themselves. Those are the students that burn out fast and have internal problems. So don't add yourself to that list. Let's manage your paperwork too. And we've talked about this over and over. Set priorities. You know, what has to be done now, what can be done later, and what really isn't that important. Chart as you go. Don't wait to the end of the shift. I don't let my students do that. I see staff do that all the time. And it rubs me the wrong way. I'd love to be able to say something, but staff doesn't work for me, but you guys do. So I can tell you, you can't do that because it's really inefficient. If you wait to the end of the day, you will forget something. You will. I know that because I've done it. So chart immediately. Chart as you're going along. You'll get the best charting, the most accurate charting, and the most timely, because if somebody else goes in later on, they can see what you've done. And then check it off. You know, your assignment, your pre-printed task list should have, you know, focus assessment, head to toe assessment, vital signs, you know, all those things. Check them off as you're done. Why don't you come back for part 3.